Hi Bart.
Kevin?
In this last webinar, we covered several legal topics in the past few episodes. In this last episode, we're going to talk about cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is a topic that has many technical aspects where you need to be precautious and take all actions needed. That's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to focus mainly on the legal part of it. And one of the new things is the NIS2 legislation that is coming up.
Yeah.
And before we dive into it, what I often hear saying is, well, that doesn't apply to me and so on. But if you really start looking at it, it applies to a lot of businesses, and that's why I think it's important to discuss.
Yes, indeed so. And what surprises me, and I know the reaction, what surprises me is that people actually have that reaction, because what NIS2 wants to do is make sure that you are not running any cybersecurity risks. You're not in risk of losing your data. You're not in risk of hacking. What NIS2 wants to do is keep your company safe. So the reason why companies have a reaction, I don't have to comply to that, so I will ignore it, is a very stupid reason, I think, because the law wants to keep you safe. You should be concerned about cybersecurity, even if NIS2 doesn't apply to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fact for sure.
That's a starting point. Second, before we dive into NIS2, second starting point, I think, is that NIS2 is not the only legislation in cybersecurity. It's not on an island. It's part of a whole series of laws coming from Europe that wants to make sure that we live in a safe digital environment. There is NIS2. There is also specific legislation for the financial sector with DORA, which is comparable to NIS2, but specific for financial institutions, banks, investment companies, insurance companies. And there as well, I often get the reaction, but that doesn't apply to me, until you start reading into the details and you see that it also complies to all service providers to those companies, also to a lot of PSPs. And I have some clients in e-commerce, for instance, that have platform websites where different sellers can offer their products, and where the payment is handled by the platform, which makes them PSP, payment service providers, that require a license, but that are also subject to DORA. And the technical suppliers that they use, of a sudden also, so in e-commerce, the impact is potentially pretty big. There is also a CRA, which is a third set of rules, very comparable to NIS2, that is specific to software incorporated into hardware. So it's a specific, but it wants to make sure that the devices we use when we go online to buy stuff are also cyber secure. And that is why I don't understand why people say this doesn't apply to me. GDPR has been around for 6 years now, and GDPR contains an obligation to take all necessary technical measures to ensure an acceptable level of technical security of the data. So everything that NIS2 wants to implement, doing a risk audit to identify cybersecurity risks, taking the necessary technical measures to ensure technical security, documenting the measures that you have taken, making sure that you have an emergency procedure, a data breach procedure. All of those obligations have been in GDPR since 2018. So all of those things are things that you should actually already have.
So it's actually not new.
It's actually not new. And what we are trying to explain to our clients is that that is the importance of GDPR compliance as well. And what you should start doing if NIS2 will apply to you, because that's why we started the discussion. A lot of people saying it doesn't apply to me. I always said there's a lot more than just NIS2, but if you dive into NIS2, indeed, there are specific rules for nuclear plants and electricity grids and water supplies, which is very specific. But then if you go down the line, in the end, a lot of obligations under NIS2 will also apply to almost all companies on the market, unless you're a small or medium-sized enterprise. They will most often be exempt.
And how is that defined?
The threshold is, I think, and with some reserve, is 10 million euros of turnover per year,
Okay.
and a certain number of people
Something
working
like
for you.
that, yeah.
So it's the typical Belgian small and medium-sized enterprise will probably escape. All other companies will have to comply to a certain set of rules. Not everything in NIS2, but a certain set of rules in
But
NIS2 anyway.
nevertheless, also those small companies, the GDPR still
Well,
applies, and still you need to have the
that's
measurements
what I
in
try
place.
to explain. They will still need to take the necessary technical measurements, and if they work for any clients, website builders, for instance, that work for a bank, well, they will have to comply because of the DORA regulation. So almost everybody will have to comply, and the right reason to want to comply is statistics in cybersecurity. 42% of organizations, companies and not-profit organizations, 42% of organizations in Belgium are attacked at least once a year. So there is, basically speaking, one chance in two that your company will be attacked by cyber criminals at least once a year. Not all of those attacks are successful,
Luckily.
but
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is the reason why you want to comply,
And
not because there's
especially
this thing.
if I look at the customers we are serving, those are high profile web shops, and what you typically see on those websites is there are some sort of attacks or people who are trying to do something every week or at least a few times a month.
Yeah. If you have a high-profile website, you should be extra careful. But what we also see is that cyber criminals don't really care about the size of your
No.
company or the brand image or whatever. All they're looking. I always compare cybercrime to a lion hunting a buffalo on the plains in Africa. It's not the strongest or the biggest or the most fancy buffalo that gets killed. The buffalo that gets killed is the slowest buffalo in the herd. That's how cyber criminals work. They look for the victim that is the least protected.
Yeah.
Automated software that will scan the internet looking for vulnerabilities, and if you have the vulnerability, you will get hacked. And if it is a ransomware attack, the only difference will be that if you're a big international corporate brand, the ransom that is asked will be higher than the small, medium-sized enterprise in Belgium. But a lot of smalls also make a big, so they don't really care. So everybody should be concerned.
Yeah. When I heard you talking about what is required for NIS, the documentation, the assessment, the even testing, for example, that's something I advise every customer do at least yearly, a pen test and so on, to make sure that you at least see where your vulnerabilities are. A lot of that has overlap with things like, for example, an ISO 27001 certification. Is there a link between
There
those?
is no direct link, but what we will see in ISO certifications is that they will demand GDPR compliance and they will demand cybersecurity compliance. So if you want to get the ISO certification, the ISO certification, you will have to make sure that those two fields are covered as well, and that you can demonstrate that they are covered, which immediately comes down to the logic that I try to share with my clients, because the lawyer talking about cybersecurity always sounds a bit strange because it's a technical issue is the first reaction, but in fact it's not. The technical compliance is one of the building blocks down the line in what you need to do. The first thing you need to do is build a company framework, a policy in the long term. Make sure that you have policy set out for your staff, what they can do, what they can't do, homework, use of public websites, use of public networks, password security, device security, you bring your own device, that all of that is, that you have a policy on that, and the policy can be, yes, you can use your own device, or no, you can't, or the policy can go either way, but you need the policy, you need the long run, you need the contractual compliance, you need to know who your partners are, what services they are providing, if there is any cyber risk involved in those services, if they can demonstrate that they are compliant, yes or no. You need the data processing agreements under GDPR, for instance. You need the emergency procedures. You need a data breach procedure that makes sure that you can act in time. That needs to be
At least
documented.
at
You
least
need,
know who you should call.
yes, Ghostbusters.
Indeed. I don't think they will help them a lot, but
You need insurance, cybersecurity insurance. What you will very often see is that a normal company insurance for business risks will exclude cyber risks. So very often you will need specific cybersecurity insurance to cover that gap. All of that is procedural legal work, putting up the frameworks, having the policy, having the contracts in place. And one of the elements will be, oh yeah, and our CISO or our IT department will need to do penetration testing and patches on software every so many time and do that. But that is only down the line one part of cybersecurity, I think. A lot of it is contractual liability work and policy work in the organization.
And indeed, like you say, prepare for the event that it will happen, because that's something I heard a very famous, but I forget his name, security researcher say. Even if you're the Pentagon, you're hackable. It's just the amount of effort that is needed is higher than when you're a web shop around the corner.
Yes.
But that means that even if you take precautious care about selecting the right the right partners, the right software, having all the updates installed and so on, you can always be the unlucky one who has to deal with something like this.
Yes, and our point of view is that there is no 100% safety guarantee. That doesn't exist. So the best thing you can do is get the highest possible safety guarantee you can get.
Yeah, for sure.
To avoid getting hacked, and to, at least if you get hacked, make sure that the consequences are as limited as possible. One of the things your cybersecurity insurance will say is that they won't cover if it turns out that you didn't take the necessary precautions to avoid getting hacked. So the importance, you won't even get the insurance. And if you get the insurance, they won't give you the coverage. So making sure that if it happens anyway, the 5% chance, we worked all the way up to 95% security, but the 5% remains. If the 5% occurs, make sure that you are in a safe place. What we are doing for a major cybersecurity insurer at this point is doing prior scans on their potential clients now to see if there is GDPR compliance, if there is ISO certification, what policies are in place, if they have the necessary contractual guarantees from partners, in order to assess if they can get insured, yes or no. Because cybersecurity insurances, they also know that the risks are very high and the consequences are very high, so they will try
the impact is big, and especially with things like ransomware and so on. There are also sometimes the ransom to be paid and things like that.
And then there's there is the pen testing you need to do, and making sure you have the latest versions of software and everything I already said. But what is very important, I think, and that is always if we make budgets on GDPR compliance or cybersecurity compliance, that is also always the first thing that is set apart. That we will maybe later, awareness sessions, making sure that your employees know the risks, know the consequences, know what they can do, know what they can't do. Phishing tests, having phishing software that will send out emails from time to time to see how people react. Making sure that you have onboarding in which you have policies set out so that new employees know what is expected of them, know what the risks are, know what the consequences are, know who to turn to.
Are caused by human mistake or by clicking on something you shouldn't click on, and so on and so on.
Yeah. And again, as with GDPR, it's about fines and the risk of running into fines under NIS2, because that's where we started the conversation. There is a legislation that asks that you take all of these measures, and if you don't, you can run into fines. That's not what is at stake here. What is at stake is your credibility as a company. If you have a database with 10,000 clients that have shared a lot of data with you, and that database is hacked, you will have to contact those 10,000 people trying to explain to them what happened, and you will lose their confidence, you will lose their respect, and you will lose clients. That is what is at stake. You're investing very big budgets to grow your business, that can get lost just like that, and you will never recover. So
Yeah.
that's why this is important.
Maybe one side note on the pen testing. Yeah, of course, pen testing is something we offer for our customers, so that's not a problem. But what I also really like to do, especially with larger platforms, is set up a bug bounty program because it.
Yes and no. Yes.
Okay, I'm curious why you say no, because from my experience, okay, it comes. Sometimes it's a pain in the ass managing all the false positives and so on. But if I see what comes out of it from a security perspective and improvements to a platform, in between the hundreds of reports you get, there are always one or two or three which
that
make
are
it all
useful.
worth.
Yes, the bug bounty program or the coordinated vulnerability disclosure policies, as they're officially called. I have a few clients that have come back from their decision to put a bug bounty invitation on their website because of the management of what. Yeah, you get a lot of false positives, and you get a lot of people that think that they found something really important, which is actually not that important. They expect to get a big reward for that. So you end up paying a lot of people for
the bounty beggars. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's a reason not to engage in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That and the risk of, because there is a law now that regulates the bounty system, because in the past accessing people's software systems without prior written consent was a crime. Where now the coordinated vulnerability disclosure policy, if you put it on your website, makes sure that white hackers that want to look for vulnerabilities in your system can do so without running the risk of committing a crime. That is one.
But on the condition that they adhere to the policy
That they adhere to
of
that they follow a number of that they contact you immediately, that they don't go any further than needed, that they don't take unnecessary risks, that they don't share the data with third parties. So there's a number of conditions which are in that policy. So at least that is covered now. But one of the reasons for companies to choose not to offer a bug bounty program is the risk of technical issues, data loss by clumsy hackers trying to gain access, going too far, making mistakes.
But if a clumsy hacker can cause a data
Yes,
breach
yes, I
or
know.
other issue, then I think you have another problem.
then you have another program. Yes, indeed, I agree. Yeah. But that is for a number of companies. That is, let's not take any unnecessary risks.
Yeah.
Who knows what they will do? That would be a reason not to do so. But indeed, it's a way to reinforce your.
Yeah, and whether you want it or not, from the moment your website is online, there will always be a hacker trying to get a bounty from you, whether you have a program or not.
Yes. But at least then you can reply, I did not invite you to attack my website. Attacking my website is a crime, so I'm not going to pay you, and I will be kind and gentle and not step to the police with what you just did.
That's true.
So that's, at least you don't have to pay them. If you invite them and they come back for money, then it's hard to back out.
That's true.
Yeah. And then in general, I think, but I already mentioned that cybersecurity is part of being an adult, mature organization that wants to offer mature services to their clients, be trustworthy, be safe. Are all things that are very important, I think, in a digital economy that we live in today. I want to be able. So many parties ask me to share or to give my confidence in what they do, to share my data. I want to make sure that if, as a customer, I do so, my privacy and my data are in good hands. GDPR is part of that. The cookie compliance that we discussed earlier is part of that. Consumer protection is part of that. But cybersecurity is also part of that. And that leads to a next step where I think that as a company, both GDPR compliance and cybersecurity compliance is also something that you have to show towards your customers. You don't have to be afraid to have an FAQ page, or who are we and what do we do, or how do we keep your data safe, where you explain that this is important for you and that you make investments and that you take steps and that you only work with trustworthy partners
Again, you
to
can
really
use this as
show
an opportunity.
it's an opportunity. It's a way of showing that that at least in that field you have an advantage over your competitors.
I think that's also, and I see, because ISO certification was something that was typical for technical implementation partners and so on. But I now see also a lot of customers getting those certifications, retailers and so on, to get that stamp of approval to also say to their customers, well, you're safe with us.
There is, since last year, the specific ISO certification on data processing, 27002, that is, I think, where specifically the way you use, process, and store data from your customers, for instance, is documented in an ISO certification, showing that you have, well, I think sometimes ISO certifications are also overestimated because they actually only show that you have processes in place that are documented. That still doesn't. It's not a guarantee.
It's just about the documentation that doesn't say your delete knob actually works.
Actually works. We have it and we know when to push it, but if it actually works is another question.
Yeah, but that's a very good remark, because it is what it is.
Yeah, but it helps, and specifically that one, I think in the digital world is a very important one, which will trigger, and I think we also discussed that in one of the previous webinars, which will trigger the need for GDPR compliance, because that will be part of the ISO certification, which will trigger the need for cybersecurity compliance because that is part of the ISO certification. So it's a good starting point. Yes.
Okay, Bart. I think that's a wrap up, not only for this episode, but for the whole mini-series. It was a pleasure having you, and thank you again for explaining all those things we need to worry about now.
Thank you for the invitation.
And you at home, thank you for watching the series. We'll probably come with new webinars soon, but for now, this is a wrap up. Thank you.